Should we start? Okay. Wherever you want me. A long introduction. Friedrich Hanukkah, everyone. Nice to see you all. Thank you for coming to join us. This group this evening. It's nice sitting in a circle. So Rabbi Yontel's going to share his journey with us. There's a few of you here who have met Rabbi Goldschmidt. And Rabbi Goldschmidt is a dear old friend of mine for many years. And he has a very exciting life and journey and life of inspiration. And I thought, Hanukkah is a time of Prosumei Nisa, to talk about, to publicize the miracle and receive the miracle of everyday life. One of the things we say is, there's a famous question of the Beis Yosef. He asks, why do we keep 8 days Hanukkah? Because the oil burned for 8 days, which means they had enough oil for how many? For 1 day, which means the first day wasn't a nace. So it must be that the first day wasn't. So why do we have 8 days Hanukkah? We should have 7 to remember the nace of the 7 days of Hanukkah. Why 8 days? And there's many answers. Anyone for the answers? Brad, got an answer?
One bit of oil for each of 8 days.
Oh, that's right, yeah. So they put a little bit of oil and it lasted the whole night. That's one. Or they filled the whole lot and a little bit went down.
The soil itself was nice.
The fact that they found the oil was nice. And my favourite answer is from the Baba Musa, the Art of Kol. He says, the fact that oil burns is a miracle. And he says, we take it for granted. Usually liquids don't burn. So we say every day in Modim, we thank you for the miracles which are with us every day. Now, I don't know you, I didn't see any miracles today. I didn't see any sea split. I didn't see any, I didn't see any miracles. Did you see any miracles today? But what we do, so we see the Nisecha, which are hidden in Teva, in nature. That's also a miracle. That's the eighth day of Hanukkah. The extra one is for the fact that oil, usually liquids don't burn. The fact that oil burns is a miracle. And that means each one of us in our own daily lives, in their own hashgacha protus, divine providence that we see in our own journeys and our own experience. And really everybody says in brochures, Eina Sefer told us Odom. This is the book of Odom. And Rabbi Stepsky, Zecher Tzaddik Livracha, says, he used to say, and the Troy quote says that really everybody is a book then. Everybody is a book to write. Right? And which brings me to my point of that Ben and Mr. Vincent, our good friend Ben here, is written, there's a few books, and his most recent one is called A Jew in Lockdown. And I've actually read most of it, and it's great. It's got some great insights into his learning during that time, and interesting, what's the word? Polemics, yeah, I still don't know what a polemic is. But use that word a lot, by the end I'll work out what a polemic is, and I'll Google it. But very written, and a book with humour and wit and wisdom. So, Eina Sefer Tos Odom. But that's, everybody has a book, and it's free. It's free, unless you want to put £50 into Ben's Swiss bank account. He said, it's all good. Yeah. So that's the whole concept of Hanukkah, about trying the message. One of the takeaways from Hanukkah is seeing HaKadosh Baruch Hu in nature, seeing HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the mundane, in the everyday part, looking for the Yad Hashem and what seems to be natural in the natural world. And each one of us have it in our lives. So one of those we see that is in the Hashgacha Protus in our own lives. How it unwraps, what happens to our lives, the people we meet, the things that happen to us, the places we live in. And Rabbi Yonatan has a great story of a travel, exciting, lots of different things, which he'll share with you. He'll share part of his book. He's only a young man, so Hashem is the early chapters of the book, Hashem. So thank you, just in England, on the way through, before the next journey, which we'll share with you, Rabbi Goldschmidt. Floor is yours.
I always think it's better when people clap afterwards. Check out on the qualities there. So, first of all, I just want to say shalom and bracha, and thank you for coming out. Obviously, it's freezing cold out, and we're English. We have to complain about the weather, and obviously COVID and everything like that. So it's wonderful to be speaking in front of people, not speaking on Zoom. It feels wonderful. I was asked today to do something extremely uncomfortable, actually, because when you sort of get the rabbi title, you get a great mask, which means that no one really gets to know who you are, because you get to talk about any subject you like. I've got a midrash, I've got a halacha, I've got a funny story about something that happened to somebody else in a different time. But very rarely is it that anybody really wants to know about your own personal journey and who you are. And that comes with a little bit of trepidation, a little bit of fear, but also a chance to share what, for me, has been my life, but has been, I know, a not particularly normative Northwest London Jewish life, thank God. I've known Rabbi Stepsky now. Me and my wife were sitting down with a pen trying to work it out, and we worked it out that we've known each other for more than 12 years. It's a long time. And Rabbi Stepsky has seen me from Aleph to Smicha, literally. When I first met Rabbi Stepsky, I was really at the beginning of my journey with long hair and a guitar, if I remember correctly. And we've maintained our correspondence, we maintain our WhatsApp messages, and so it's a beautiful thing that I'm able to come here and speak around Stepsky's minyan, because it's very hoshev to me.
Who had the long hair at the time? No, I don't know.
Oh no, it's okay. So at that time, it was me with the long hair and the guitar, and Rabbi Stepsky with the patience, with the long. What Erica Pine used to say, with the long patience to suffer me. Anyway, so I'll speak a little bit about myself, a little bit about what I do now. Obviously, as I get to what is current, there might be some questions. If it's possible, just not to interrupt the flow. If you have questions, just remember at the end. I'll make sure that there's time if there's anything that I haven't covered. I would say I grew up, but my wife would disagree, in a very, very complicated state of living in different worlds that I think a lot of secular, traditional Reform Jews do. In terms of my identity, of who I was, I knew a Jewish family, we had a Holocaust background. We were very, very proud of our roots. We went to Israel almost every year. We were very, very proud to do Shabbats and go to the festivals, go to the synagogue and things like that. But my actual knowledge of Torah and mitzvot and our history was actually bare minimum. It was more of an identity than anything that was tangible or real. For me, this has been something that I've gone back and forth with my entire life, trying to understand where the end of traditionalism is and where the beginning of religiosity is. I still don't have an answer to that exact question, but for me it's something that I've puzzled with and pondered most of my life. My father is, as you would say, a traditional Ashkenazic Jew. He's very, very set in his ways. He used to be a luggage macher and a bit of a handbag macher. He's a great guy. With me and my wife and family staying with him at the moment in Hatchend. My mother has very deep interests in Egyptology. She's able to translate hieroglyphics, hieratic. She has a lot of knowledge of different religions, and I was exposed to a lot of that growing up. So my mother's bookshelf had books from every religion. If you can think about it, we had it. We had things from the Baha'i, and we had the Bhagavad Gita from Hinduism, and we had the Quran. We had anything like that, and of course we had Torah books. We had all sorts of things, and I suppose now, looking back on it, it kind of makes sense. But at the time, obviously, it was confusing trying to work out who one is. And I believe that many Jews, especially Balei Tshuva, are caught up in the Hanukkah story itself. We're products of modern Hellenism. We're Jews, but we're subsumed into the culture. We're proud of who we are, but very often disconnected from our ancient roots. I mean, even now, dressed, very, very humbly, in my sort of puritanical garb, we do things in a certain way. We're affected by our journey through Europe. To say that we're authentically like the Tanakh would be a great stretch. And to say that we're even authentically like the post-Tanakh era would be an even greater stretch, perhaps. That being said, in my opinion, I think that we are, as in the terms of Matisyahu and his priestly gang, we're fighting against this deep Hellenism, against this deep drive towards secularism, to becoming lost. And for me, a lot of that happened in between school and university. At school, I had a wonderful time. I was barely there most of the time. I'm not sure anybody really missed me. Managed to get away with it for a lot of the time. I was very interested in music. I'm still, as I call the sheer busking to the Bima, I was fascinated by music. I play guitar, a bit of bass. My wife plays about 6 or 7 instruments. She's really phenomenal. And I was sort of focused on that. I was focused on art. I was focused on music. And in terms of academia, in terms of being part of the school, I wasn't really so interested in it. I didn't feel like I belonged there at all. And I had no idea what I was doing there most days, except that it gave me opportunity to doodle. That was about all I really achieved at school, unfortunately. After school, I went to King's College to study nursing. And I was there for a little bit of time, and it set me on some very, very difficult journeys. I was working in a palliative care ward for some time, watching people check in and mostly check out. It was every single day, people passing through. Another one of my placements was leukemia care for children at Great Ormond Street. And you start to ask big questions. And as it happened, I had a lot of friends in lots of different religions, and I was very, very social, and I played in a lot of bands. And I started to ask questions and look for answers. And that took me all over the place. I used to, hang out with one of my friends who was a Muslim, who was always we used to go to his mosque. I went to the Hare Krishna temple in central London many times. I went to churches, I read books. The only thing I never really bothered to do was to look into my own faith, which is quite amusing, but I guess whatever's normative and comfortable doesn't have an appeal at that age in general, and so I didn't really think about it too much. Around this time, I'd sort of left university. I'd had enough of the NHS and had enough of myself, and I was more committed to being an artist and being a musician than I'd ever been at that time. And so I started going to New York, I started playing, I started busking, I started going to different gigs and different things, and I was just obsessed with music, and it took me all over the place. So I was fascinated by jazz, fascinated by funk, fascinated by rock, even a little bit of metal as well, here and there, when I get the chance. And this identical time, this crossroads in my life, my own grandmother started to pass. And my grandmother, Betty Goldschmidt, was a Holocaust survivor, very sweet, humble, able person, very gentle. And I never knew my grandfather on that side. And as she passed, I started to ask more questions, like, what does this Jewish thing mean to me now? And the rest of the family isn't so connected. And I felt as the firstborn son of this family that was literally passing out before my eyes, that maybe it was time to just get a little bit interested. And that's why I think the first mitzvah of the Torah is to care. Not to go to Shir, not to go to Shacharit, not to do anything like that, not to light candles. It's whether or not we value this heritage we've been given. It means different things to different people. Some of us, it's an ache. Some of us, it's a joy. But whatever it is, we have to ask a question about whether or not we care about it. And I began increasingly to think about, do I care about it more or less? I started to read some books. I read some books by Rabbi Stepsky, who I later meet. I think there's a doorbell moment in my memory here. And at that time, I started going to Eshet Torah in Hendon, and I met my first Orthodox rabbi, who was Rabbi Daniel Rowe. I'm sure some of you are familiar with him. I met up with him, and I listened to him speak, and I saw him privately, and I hit him with what he was teaching was tautology, and the philosophical questions I gained from all my reading, and how did this work and how that worked. And he gave me the most chilling answer that has taken me from a young man until this very day. Do you know what he told me? I asked him, I fired at him maybe 30 questions about faith and hashgacha pratit and free will and all these things. And he told me the only answer that's really ever stuck with me, he told me that he didn't know. In an experience filled with people pretending to have all the answers, whether that be through my journey through Reform, whether that be my experience of different religion, the book says this, depending on which book it is, or the imam said that, or the rabbi said that, or the person said that, or the priest, or the sadhu, or the guru. No one had ever turned to me and said, those are good questions. Not all good questions have good answers. And that really intrigued me. Because this was a man, religious man, the place that I spoke to him in his home, covered in books, a learned man. And here he was, he's supposed to have all the answers. He's the rabbi, right? This would go to the rabbi for the answers. But for me, this was the answer. The answer was that he didn't know. Which prompted my very next question, which was, okay, if you don't know, then you're still praying and learning and doing all the things and keeping Shabbat. And he said, oh, my inability to know these absolute philosophical questions doesn't hold me back from doing mitzvot and learning and doing good things. And with that, a real light bulb went off in my head that I didn't need to seek all the answers anymore. I didn't need to find absolute clarity in every single question. It wasn't needed to have some textbook question to it and a textbook answer anymore. It was okay to simply not know and to say, oh, very good, I have questions. Very nice. I still have questions. I wonder about the effect of Mesopotamian literature on our Tanakh. I wonder about the effect of the different exiles and the different things we picked up, the different cultures we've encountered. How much of it is authentic? How much of it is imported? I ask these questions. I'm sure we all do. But I came to a different conclusion that it's okay not to know. It's not, when I say not to know, we still have to investigate. Still, I love to read and to investigate these questions. But it's possible to live and not have all the answers. I think marriage teaches one that very, very aptly. Especially when you're not necessarily able to discern the mind of your partner, but you have to know. You don't always have to know to get it right as well. Sometimes you can get it right by not knowing, just by being there, by being supportive. I say that's the only thing I do personally. Following that meeting with Rabbi Rowe, he arranged for me to go to Aish Torah in Jerusalem, where I went for a few months, and I was astounded. It was the first time having hated school and hating college and hated university, and I was suddenly in an environment where the learning was interesting to me. And I asked what the schedule was. Everyone kind of laughed at me. I said, what time is the lecture? They were like, you're new. I said, there's the books, there's the desks, there's classes if you want, come if you want to come, don't come if you don't want to come. It was the strangest experience I'd ever had. All these people sitting around screaming at each other in this room with these books. And it was all so disorganized, it was finally a place for me. I couldn't believe it. I didn't believe that such a wondrous learning institution could exist. I said, what about the homework? No, there's no homework. What about the tuition? No tuition. How's the food? Not bad. It was an interesting experience for me. After a few months of being there, I decided that given who I was and given just my propensity for things, it wasn't yet time to be in yeshiva. I was also working at the time with my father. We were running his luggage business. So I came back to London, and I ended up coming to the JLE, which was where I really started to come all the time. Eventually, I found this family. They may be here. This wonderful family who had me in their loft for how many years did you have me in your loft?
We enjoyed it so much we lost track of time.
We lost track of time. I got to stay in the loft about a few weeks ago. Actually, I was very enamored to stay back in the loft. Actually, it was really nice. And so my journey with the JLE began there, and I started going to davening and going to learning, and it was a slowly approach. And one of the things that I noted immediately was that there were a lot of books and there were a lot of classes, but there wasn't a lot of reading going on except when I was focused. And so I took it upon myself to try and catch up. So I read the Tanakh, I started reading the Rambam, which the amount of English forum that they had in the JLE was incredible. I was able to get into that. I undertook Rabbi Freilich's Hebrew Ulpan and Talmud Ulpan, may he be blessed, his memory be blessed. And slowly but slowly, I sort of tried to play catch up. And it was a very arduous and difficult and enjoyable process. And I learned a lot about myself and about others and about my own patience along the way. For some reason, the other Goldschmidt family managed to put up with the patience to have me there. Rabbi Stepsky didn't lose patience for me too much. They kept me there. And I stuck that out until I finished work with my father. I moved to Yerushalayim and I went to yeshiva. Happy to say that I was able to attend things like Orsamer and Midrash Shmuel. Went to quite a few different places and stacked it out. I married and I joined the Boston Kollel in Harnof, where I sat, and I learned, eventually becoming the Gabbai to the Boston Rebbe for some time. I was very close with that. However, my morning Seder was actually at a Sephardic synagogue. And I became, again, lost in the next question of the Hasidus and the Sephardic world, which was my next problem, which I went into trying to work out again, unfortunately. I'd forgotten the lesson of Rabbi Rowe. And so it continued as my life quickly financially unfolded and collapsed and went into absolute chaos. And following an extremely grueling Israeli divorce, I found myself penniless, sitting by the side of the road with my guitar, busking in Machane Yehuda, which on the surface might look quite serious, but for me it was almost like a return to self. I kind of knew what to do with that. Like that I knew how to deal with. Okay, guitar is here, case is there, jangle jangle, make the money and continue. It was a time of extreme difficulty financially and a time emotionally where I began to really have doubts about whether I should be here. Should I go back to the UK? What am I doing here in Yerushalayim? I really want to do all of this. I'm not an easy quitter, so I stuck it out. And I stuck it out until I bumped into my second wife, Elisheva, who is probably one of the most powerful people I've ever met in my life, continue to know. And in the course of our conversations when we met, one of the things that she made very clear to me was that she didn't really have time for people who didn't believe that they could achieve things or that they were stuck in a rut or they couldn't do things. And that kind of attitude was the kind of thing that didn't interest her in terms of her friendship or partnership or anything like that. This was a person who played 7 instruments, spoke a few languages. She had been on the Broadway, she performed in Phantom of the Opera and Cats and things like that prior to her Gior. Incredible amount of knowledge that she had, and I was inspired. What can I say? And we formed our friendship, and as it happened, my Rav was a very good shidduch. We went to South Africa, and that's where we got married. And we lived in Cape Town for 2 years, and I actually had my first posting. It was sort of a fabricated, organic posting because there was a local synagogue that didn't really have anything going, and we were a local Orthodox Shomer Shabbat family. So we were there. So we started to host people, we started to host Shirim, started to host Shabbatons. Very quickly, we ended up with more people at the house than at the shul, and things started getting. We had a wonderful time in South Africa, and I was asked by the Rav who married us, Rabbi David Ben Shlush, who's a great guy. He made me make a promise when we got married. Very not so into making promises to people that you then have to pay off, but he said, if you ever go back to Yerushalayim, there's a rabbi I want you to meet there. I want you to go to Midrash Sfardi in the old city, and I want you to go meet Rabbi Yaakov Peretz. He's an amazing person, amazing person from the previous generation. He was previously the chief rabbi of Hebron. He's learned with some of the greats, and he's pasaked on some very majorly interesting inyanim. And so I sort of half-heartedly agreed to this, knowing that it was unlikely we were settling in South Africa, until my luck ran out with the visa office, and I found myself back in Yerushalayim. And funny enough, I had not much to do in Yerushalayim, so I picked up my guitar and I went back and I started busking again, as my wife tried to get her Aliyah papers together, which we were told would take 3 months, but due to the joys of Israeli bureaucracy, took about 8 months to be separated. And so during that time, I was a bit lost, and I thought, you know what? I don't know how it really came to me one day. I sort of promised the rabbi I would go meet this Rabbi Yaakov. So I knew where that was. I knew where Midrash Sfardi was. It's in Miskav Ladach, in the old city, right in the heart of the old city of Jerusalem. And I walked into the shir, and about halfway through, I had to stop. I had to think about what on earth I was doing then, this all Hebrew-speaking shir, with a Rav who was turning my mind upside down. Me and Rabbi Stepsky were just walking, saying, my rabbi makes a bracha before he does until I die. That's what he does. He doesn't wash and then make a bracha. He makes a bracha and then he washes. He doesn't do this, he does that. And everything he does is a long, incredible conversation that takes you through the sources, through the Makorot, and brings you back down to baseline Pesach Halacha, the way he sees it. I don't always see it the way he sees it, but I always have time to see it. And to be in the presence of a Gadol Torah who understands you. And it was a big aliyah for me in terms of my Hebrew. Suddenly, I was, without knowing it, I was caught up in this yeshiva program. However, the yeshiva program came with a great catch. unlike my previous yeshiva experience where they were happy to give me a bed and give me food and give me classes for free, Rav Kassin's yeshiva in the old city does not work for free. Any student who studies there has to sign a contract for shlichut. That's the deal. You want to study, studies are great, it's stipended kollel, it's very nice conditions, but you have to go on a shlichut. Have to do it. That's the, everyone gets forced at some point to go somewhere. So they started to, leave me alone because we were basically waiting for my wife to arrive. However, about a week after my wife arrived, they decided that it was time for me to go on shlichut. I'd had my 8 months of, and they offered us America. We took some interviews for it. It wasn't shayach at all. I wasn't ready at all. Certainly not ready to be a rabbi or even to complete the smicha, let alone take a shlichut. And so I sort of got away with wangling out of it for about a year. And I did very well at this. I was always busy. It was a very, very convoluted situation that I had going on. And it was complicated to explain. When you tell somebody it's complicated to explain, most people give up. It's really good. If you ever want to get out of something, they press me and say, look, it takes a bit of time to explain it to you, and it's a bit complicated. You get out of a lot of things. So, unbeknownst to me, around the same time as my son Asher was born, my wife had a private meeting with Rav Kassin, and they had decided for me where I was going to go and what I was going to do. Now, I can say that I had no idea. I was sitting, learning, enjoying my coffee at the time, as you do. And I got called up to the office, and they said, Jonathan, what are you doing Thursday? And bear in mind, it was like Sunday. And I said, Thursday? Tomorrow? Not my God. Oh, could you fly to Delhi and transfer to Cochin and go to the synagogue there to meet with the Star K? Now, I was a little bit lost at this point, but apparently, and then they said the classic line, I'm sure your wife has told you all about it. Which at the time was funny because obviously she had said nothing to me about this. I had no idea what was, I'd never been to Cochin. I'd been to India previously. Me and my father had traveled from Delhi to Dharamshala by train and seen all the tea trail up there. My father's been going to India for many, many years to buy luggage. My mother is going to India, I think, even longer. And she even speaks a bit of Tamil, a bit of Hindi, and have a bit of a familial connection with India. I was a little bit surprised when they gave me my passport and they gave me my visa and my ticket. That all seemed a bit surreal to me in the office. And that was my introduction to rabbinics. I mean, I hadn't yet completed my smicha, but I would do so over the course of that year. Finally got it through after many years of finishing. And we had nothing else to do but say goodbye to my newborn baby, who's just been born, and jump on a plane and end up in India. And I really didn't understand very much about what I was supposed to do out there. I was just told, take the flight, everything will be all right, which I guess, everything's okay. The Star K is a major American kashrut operation run by Rabbi Heinemann, who's the chief posek, and they needed somebody to be in India full time. And they needed someone not just to run the kashrut across India and the Far East, but they also needed someone to run the Paradise Synagogue, which is the oldest active synagogue in the Commonwealth of Nations. It's potentially older, but we know that it was built in 1568. It's originally a Spanish-Portuguese synagogue. I know some of you have been there, which is wonderful. And I can tell you that the moment that I walked into the synagogue, my life changed. It was Friday afternoon. I walked into the synagogue. I've never seen anything like it before in my life. I just arrived in India. I was terribly jet lagged. I don't know if you've ever landed in India, but it is quite a culture shock normally. Even if you've been there before, it tends to be quite a jarring experience. And so I got there, and they said, come on, take the Bima. Now for me, I was much more happy busking than Bimering, that's for sure. For me, the Bima was somewhere that, occasionally, once in a while, if I, traveled somewhere, maybe I got up to make a brach on the Torah or something like that. But it was not a normative experience for me to do that. And yet, that's what was needed. And so we were there. I then undertook the most insane travel across India for 2 weeks with Rav Joel Weinberger. We traveled to factory after factory. I saw all kinds of things that you eat that are on your shelves, things that are in the food that is in your shelves, more ingredients and products like this. The variety of plants in India and across Asia is really big. And so that became a 2-week crash course in kashrut, big start. I'd done mashgiach work. It tended to be looking at letters. Suddenly I was looking at these factories with massive, with gallons of ingredients, with just incredible amount of inventory and products and things like that. And the assumption was that I knew what I was talking about and I could do this, which I found quite funny at the time, as I had no idea what I was doing. But as it happened, the Star K, they started to really, really assist me. I got tons of learning in. I got lots of additional havrutas and online work and people phoning me to explain to me the steps. And I came back to Jerusalem after 2 weeks and I felt very different about it all, which was funny because they phoned me up about 2 days after I landed. They said, look, you're going to have to come back next week. So I started doing this, and I would be in Yerushalayim for a week, and I would be in India for 2 or 3 weeks. And it started to get all very surreal. I don't know if you've had that dream where you wake up and then you wake up, but you're still dreaming and then you wake up. So in my dream, I was waking up in Jerusalem at the Shabbat table when I would wake up, and then when I would fall asleep, I would be back in India. That seemed to be the way it would go. And the trips became longer and longer, and they became more and more peculiar and more bizarre. And I was really getting into it. And we came back, and they dropped the ultimatum on me. They said, look, do you want to do this? And I thought, I have no idea. Which is normally, as I said, it's a great answer. I'll need to think about it. It could take some time. It's complicated. So they said, no, that's not going to work. What if next week you and your wife and your kids and a couple, another Hazan from the yeshiva fly out there and you run the synagogue for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur? Now, that was a bit daunting, I felt, but they didn't seem to think so. So they said, okay, very good. We picked up a shofar. We picked up a Sefer Torah, which, by the way, taking a Sefer Torah through daily customs is not simple. If anyone tries to tell you this, tell them for me, it is not simple. First of all, we had to try and declare it. They wanted us to declare what it was. They weren't so comfortable with the idea of the Sefer Torah traveling in the cabin. That was a bit of a problem because it was oversized. They wanted to know what it was made from. And when we told them that it was made from animal skin, the reaction from our Hindu counterparts at the airport was, from my perspective, positive, because they shooed us onto the airplane and told us to get out of there, which was exactly what I wanted. Although at the time it was much more theatrical and wild. And my wife, who had never been to India, of course, was dumped to run this kahila, and we were there all of a sudden. Then they dropped on us that the synagogue is actually very busy around the Hagim. It's not just 40 or so Jews left in Cochin. There's actually hundreds of Israelis who drop in for Rosh Hashanah. I mean, no problem, right? Which was fine, because I'd run a service before, so that would be a problem, except I hadn't. So it was all a little bit on the fly. Not only that, it was Sephardic. Not only was it Sephardic, but it was this specific Indian minhag that is at times barefoot, at times very theatrical. And so, like anybody who has a background in improvisational music, I did what anybody does. I played the basics and I went along with it, which I thought was good. I thought that was the only way to play it. My wife immediately got into the role. She loved it there. We were assisted at every stage by the Indian community to do everything. We had to build a kosher kitchen in about a week to feed about 100, 120 people. Quite daunting as well, I thought at the time. Except I wasn't there, I was busy doing kashrut, so that was something she had to do. We suddenly had to realize the situation in India, which we had never really thought of previously. How do you get meat there? How do you get fish? How do you get your vegetables? How do you do it all without the language skills? Which was, the kind of baptism of fire, if you will, to excuse the euphemism. And we found ourselves there. We were there for 2 months. We ran Rosh Hashanah till Sukkot with the Jewish community. We had Israelis all the time, in and out. I was also getting training, going to different factories, flying up to Mumbai, flying all over the place, going to Hyderabad, different places. And me and my wife spoke. We thought about it. We understood the complications. We thought about the Hanukkah. We thought about the journey, what it would mean. And I signed on the dotted line 3 years to be in the synagogue as a basic. And that was what propelled everything after that. So we began at the Paradise Synagogue in India. I'm not going to lie that it would have been 3 years except for the COVID cut things short by a chunk of time. Some of the most inspirational experiences of my life happened in that synagogue. Other than taking the Bima for the first time, doing Kriya for the first time, calling my father up and doing Kriya for him on Yom Kippur, a personal moment for me. All day, every day, drama. Incredible drama. The vegetables have gone missing, the meat never arrived, the lulav's lost in Delhi. Okay. And I loved it. I love the madness. I love the insanity of it because it fitted me just so perfectly. I'd never really been so organized, and the fact that I was in such a disorganized situation just allowed me to look like I had it together, which was great. I'm sure it will work out, Baruch Hashem. What are we going to do, Rabbi? It's complicated. Take me time for me to explain things. I need time to think about it. We never thought that it would be a real thing, and even when we were doing it, it didn't feel real. Even when we were there for a long time, when we were part of the tapestry, I can't tell you how we inserted ourselves into the lives of Jewtown, Cochin. It's a real place, Jewtown, Cochin. Incredible story there. Most people, we hear all about the Ashkenazi Jewry, we hear about the Holocaust, we hear about the Sephardic journey to Morocco, we hear about Spanish Portuguese. Stories about the Indian Jews, less known. People don't seem to be as savvy about it, which is unfortunate, considering the first Jewish community arrives after the destruction of the Second Temple period in Crangalore. Following that, they start to move down and they build various different kahilas. We have, aside from the Baghdadi community and the Spanish Portuguese, we have the Malabari Jews. Often me and my wife also used to go and run the synagogue in Calcutta. It's a different area completely, different minhag. And I felt that there was a journey of the Indian Jewry that was really unknown. And so we began to speak publicly about our journey through Indian custom. That's, firstly, you've got to know, they told me when I took the synagogue, rice on Pesach, it's an absolute thing. This is it. If you come, you're a member of the Kehillah, you eat rice on Pesach. And I never considered eating rice on Pesach. But this was an absolute thing, and they wanted the rabbi to do it. Spoke to my rabbi, he said, 100% you have to do it. The rabbi of the Kehillah, you have to do it. Which was interesting. Then they told me that, many people pray barefooted, and we'd like the rabbi to do that. I phoned my rabbi. He said, it's complicated. In the end, I've been praying Chof Regel without shoes for all the time of the Bima, which was personal delight, especially in India where it's very hot. And that began this journey of everything that I thought I knew about Judaism was somehow different in India. That's just the way we do things here. This is the way it is. This is what we have. These are the basics. I discovered that the locals knew every single kosher fish that Jews could eat. Every single thing that we never wanted for fish. The Star K allowed us to, through their contacts, we were able to put down black kosher meat, Shabbat and Yom Tovim for people. We revamped the mikveh. We have the only kosher mikveh in South India. I can tell you it's not really necessary at the time. Some incredible stories of that mikveh, of what's, people traveling through Asia, and we have the southernmost tip mikveh. It's a very busy mikveh, believe it or not. We have to have the water checked and sent to a lab to see if it's okay. We had to build a cover for it. We had all sorts of incredible things like this. After COVID hit, my life basically felt completely empty. I was not allowed to stay in India due to COVID. All my work was in India, my synagogue was in India, my wife's clothes and the kids' toys were in India. Baruch Hashem, still there. And we ended up in the UK for a little bit. But I came and saw Rabbi Stepsky, which was lovely. We had a breakfast. which was when I got a call from the Stark, and they said, look, Jonathan, what are you doing next Thursday? I don't know, what it is about Thursdays. I have a special color Thursday. Could you fly to Dubai and undertake some kashrus in Dubai? Now, at the time, I remember thinking, right, kashrus in Dubai, that's a thing. Right? So we went to Dubai. I was there to be present for the opening of the UAE's Holocaust Memorial Museum, an unthinkable, unparalleled thing I would never see in my life, never think that could be. There I am, the descendant of a Holocaust survivor in a Holocaust museum in the UAE, and I'm speaking. And I'm talking about her journey and speaking about things. And I had no idea at the time what was coming. Because just after that, they said, look, if you're not busy, could you fly to Sri Lanka? Because we need someone to go to Sri Lanka. So we ended up just now for 4 months in Sri Lanka as well. So you just keep on getting moved around by, I signed up for Shlichut, but I thought that meant, one country, getting your own office. That'd be nice, maybe a couple. But no, it's actually meant jumping from country to country to country. And so over the last 3 or 4 years, we've been zocha to see Jewish sites and to deal with kashrus and with other things for the Jewish community in places like Nepal, places like Sri Lanka, across India, every state of India. And I won't lie that it's been an amazing journey. But all of the journey really began with a specific coffee that I had with my wife before we got married. And I often go back to this coffee where she said, look, if you're the kind of person who believes you can't do things, you're not capable of achieving things, this is kind of where the friendship ends and we're good and we can leave things here, everything's fine, everything's proper, it's nice to know you. I came into this journey, I felt, with hindrance. I knew more about Metallica than I did about Mishnah. I thought of a couple of other jokes that went that way and I didn't know who would get it, so I went for Metallica. I came in really not knowing Aleph to Bet. I really didn't know. And when they said, look, you're going to have to lane, you're going to have to blow shofar, the automatic response that anybody in their right mind, Baruch Hashem, I'm not one of those people, would say is, I can't. Because the Yetzer Hara of our generation has given us mamash everything. We don't even, on this phone, I've got my Safaria app. Oh, great, I've got, a couple of 1,000 years of Jewish textual ability translated in English for me. Minyanim everywhere you can get kosher food, Heksherim on everything, Erev, beautiful Jewish schools. We live mostly without fear of reprisals, without kind of any fear against ourselves. I walk around with a kippah, I walk around with my sitzit out, across Europe, across India. And so the Yetzer Hara's only trick right now, it's so simple. It's not you're not good enough, because we've been told by American celebrities how great we are for so long that we know how good we are. Right? It's not that we're not, not beautiful, we're not special. It's that we're not capable. Not capable of what is the question. And I hope that it makes sense that I tell you that if I can do it from my position of coming at it, of, knowing a lot more to do with Motown than I had to do with from Motown, I'm certain you can too. And I think this goes back to the Ikka message of Hanukkah. What is Hanukkah about? So okay, so we'll be Jews, but we'll be normal, we'll be lost in the society, and we'll have our culture, we'll be fine. And it sounds good, but it's not very riveting, is it? It's not really living at the edge of your seat. Have you ever seen a great Moshe? Have you ever seen a great movie? You're on the edge of your seat the whole time from start to finish. There's a couple good ones. Casablanca's not one of them. If your life doesn't feel like that, if your marriage doesn't feel like that, if your relationship with your children doesn't feel like that, it's nice to blame all the problems of our childhood and all the issues that we have, and my terrible bank manager who just doesn't see things the way I see things. We only really have ourselves to blame. And that's why, incredibly, Hanukkah, we don't spend a lot of time talking about the Maccabean revolt. We don't read the book of Maccabees even in the Apocrypha. Fascinating. We delved into the Apocrypha. What we actually do is we go home, we light candles, and we spin the dreidel, and we eat chocolate coins, We have a great time. We have family time. And what are we really doing? We're really just showing who can't light a candle? You know, that's it. If you believe you can light a candle, why can't you lane? Why can't you learn? Why can't you be the Rav? Why can't you go to Kollel? Why can't you learn and work? Why do you need somebody else's definition of what should be for you? Why can't you achieve your dreams? It's as simple as lighting a candle. The only difference is you have to have the tenacity and, I guess, the mushugas often to see it through. And so it's not really a life of inspiration. I guess, people say my life is very interesting, it's very strange, it's been very peculiar at times for sure. But it's more than that. I was offered, as my grandmother started to slip into mention to pass, a question. Does this Jewish thing matter to me? Does it not really matter to me? And the question comes, you know what really matters to people? Oxygen, food, clothing, shelter. We don't take any of those things for granted. If you don't have them, you very quickly know about it. I've been there a couple of times without them. It's not pleasant. If you want to achieve something with your dreams, if you have a goal, do not present yourself at 120 to Shemayim with your excuses. They ask a lot of questions in Shemayim. They ask did you learn Torah? Were you honest in your business? We all know, very common sugyas. You're going to have to ask yourself, did you live the life you wanted to live? Did you do what you wanted to do with the tools you were given? And people know I'm a bit of a magician as well, magic and music. You're going to ask yourself, did you play with all your cards? Did you use your full hand? For me, that's the message of Hanukkah. And I hope that if anybody is ever going through a time when they're not exactly sure, they can think, I saw this Meshuggah guy. How was he a good speaker? It's complicated. And he took himself from Aleph to Smicha. I guarantee you, if someone as lowly as me can do it, I'm certain everybody can take themselves from wherever they are to wherever they want to be. And I don't want to say it should look like this. It shouldn't necessarily look like my journey, or it shouldn't come with a hat or a jacket. It should be your journey. But if you're not going to do it, if you're not going to define it, if you're not going to go for it, you're going to end up coming to me eventually and speaking to me as Rabbi saying, Rabbi, I'm filled with all these regrets. I didn't do this, I didn't do X. You're going to end up like the people I was watching check out in Gullen Ward, telling me about the things they wish they had done. I wish I'd built a house. I wish I'd learned to paint. Amazing how many people wish they'd learned to paint. That's quite common. I decided that I didn't want to do that. So that's my journey so far. I'm a young guy still. I'm sure I've got a lot more time to do some more crazy things with myself. I'm hoping to go back to India very soon. I've just been granted clearance and visas. The family's not coming for this trip. It's a cashless trip. But the question is, what's next? Are we going back to India? Are we going forward? I heard that Rabbi Stepsky might need like a youth director. It would be nice to thought about me. Not to come and help you out. But it seems very likely that the journey goes on. And I really am only really here because of the amazing propensity of my wife to sort of trust Hashem and go for it. And because I listened to her lesson. Her lesson is from somebody who acted on the stage and plays with instruments and speaks different languages. She doesn't have a I can't. She only has a I can. And I hope that for all of us, we can absorb a bit of that and know that really Hashem will help us achieve our goals if we truly put our hearts in the right place and it's for the right goal. It's the Shem Shemayim. We want to be the best people we can be. What's more the Shem Shemayim than that? Everything else is bet. Who you are is Aleph. Go forward and have it. Light it. Light that candle for yourselves and have at least a Meshuggah a time as I have. It's been great. Happy to field any questions about my convoluted life story. If anybody has any questions, obviously I know some people. Please.
How do your parents feel about you now? If you don't mind me asking.
I think that every parent-child relationship is always extraordinarily complicated. I'm sure everybody has. I have children. It's complicated. I have a 3-year-old. That's very complicated. There have been moments of extreme friction and extreme resolution. And I can tell you that in my own way I see it, I hope that I've been able to do something that makes my parents proud of me and to have nachas, so we have grandkids, so it's nice. But at the same time, because it's been so deeply connected with India for so long, and both my parents have such a kesher with India, like a very deep kesher with India. My mum was going way back in the day. It's allowed us to really have something in common. My father's been out many, many times to see us in India. I've taken him on the road with the kashrut even. We did a run of making the only grape juice in India. We decided to go to a factory and make kosher grape juice, which was a lot of fun. It was a bit complicated. But he was there for that, to assist us. You know, obviously, one wants to shed nachas, but one also wants to be one's own person, which is the struggle of being a child in that adult relationship. We all want the best for our children. It's just our children's best doesn't look like ours necessarily. I unapologetically say that I am who I am. I'm not pretending otherwise. And so it has been at times with friction, but the overall feeling is that I love them and we love each other. Right now, I'm staying my whole family at my dad's house. And I don't think my dad's complaining. He's getting fed very nicely, and the grandkids are tearing apart the house. He seems quite happy. Any other questions?
Are you doing anything next Thursday?
So it's actually funny you mention that, because next Thursday I'm free if you want to do something. We can get together. I have to, so I have to ask the start date first and get together.
Okay. So before one of the thoughts I had was, do you regret anything you've done in the past in terms of your very colourful childhood and early youth? Because it seems to me that it's been absolutely indispensable to who you are now.
So, of course, whenever one is speaking publicly about one's life, one gives the candy floss version without all of the slip-ups and crashes and burns and collisions and crashing. And of course, one has to for the sake of one's own sanity, I guess. But I have deep regrets about things I've done in the past. I also have the knowledge that comes from having regrets, which is a kind of joy in of itself. I mean, obviously, I have done some pretty stupid things, but they've taken me to a place where I can have rachmanos on stupid things. I've made some mistakes, and this was a big theological point for me, by the way. For me, this was the ikar ikarut, why I couldn't believe in religion for so long, was because it was filled with so many perfect people. This one's perfect. This saint is perfect. This one never sneezed. Took his Benadryl. But our Tanakh and our Masorah and our heroes are not people who haven't made mistakes. We don't have that concept. In fact, I think from a Jewish perspective, the idea of a person without sin is a little bit insulting to the general situation. I think we deal with real people, and Abraham was a real person. David was a real person. Our sages are real people. They've made real mistakes. And I don't think that having regrets about what one has done is the same as living a life of regret, if that makes sense. Of course, there's lots of things I wish I could go back and, obviously, with the perspective now, and change. But if I didn't go back and make those mistakes, I wouldn't be here, standing here, saying that I regret them. It ends up being a cycle after that. I hope that answers. It's a bit of a diversion to a specific mistake, but in general, I feel good about where I've got to despite those mistakes.
Rabbi, can I ask you something? You went from Aleph Beis to Smicha. You talk about the answer you got about the rabbi, and you wrote, I don't know. When did Emunah come in? When did faith come in?
So,
did it come in gradually, or did it come in at once, or did you always have faith? Where did that?
that's a great question. I always had faith in God. At times, the terminology of the lexicon, the language that I use to express that has changed, but I've always felt connected with God from even when I was younger and praying. So I never really had that question. But I think that it is almost an answer in itself. When you realize that you don't need always to have an intellectual answer to everything, you don't need to have it, it begins a sort of a step of amuna, so to speak, of doing things that on the fly. It's a bit like I took this job once, anyway, in this crazy restaurant, and I had sort of blacked my way into the restaurant saying that I could cook, which was a little bit of an exaggeration at the time, because I was really more of a toasted cheese sandwich kind of guy than the cook. But a lot of I don't know and a lot of amuna and a lot of watching and going for it. And I can say I've worked in about 6 or 7, 8 different restaurants since then. You kind of learn on the fly. So there's what you said for the simple amuna of understanding that not all of my philosophical or theological questions will ever be answered until that great day. And rather than that being a problem, I've always seen that as the most liberating idea that I've ever come across. Rather than having to be subservient to some kind of knowledge that I'm supposed to have. I'm trying to be genuine and real and saying, that's a great question, I have no idea. We'll have to just trust that it all works out and go for it. And I think that I can tell you that I don't have a problem with Amunah. I'm the grandchild of a Holocaust survivor with 2 sons born in the rebuilt city of Yerushalayim. It all gets a little bit ethereal and preposterous after that. It's people praying for the rebuilding of Yerushalayim, and then you're sitting on the bus, there's traffic, there's roadworks, you're like, oh my God, I'm going to be late. All this rebuilding of the holy city, I'm going to be late. It's real. It's not, Jewish life isn't some thing in a book. It's tangible. You can grab hold of it. It's not we believe a story, a mythology. Okay, top. Until you go visit Shimon HaTzadik's kever, until you go touch the kotel, until you go on the tunnels under the kotel and see what you can see. It's not just a faith. It's almost hard to have faith. It's so real. We're here. We're still doing it. We're still doing our mission. Still doing it. For me, it's a blow away. I talk to people. I say, after the first son was born in Yerushalayim, it was difficult. The second one was pretty stupendous. You walk around Yerushalayim, you meet people from every kind of background, culture, country, language. If that's not divine providence, then somebody's doing very, very well in the organization of that. I don't know how else that would work.
How much do you think that Hashgacha Pratit has shaped your life?
I would say that from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to sleep, almost everything that happens to me is a sort of wild Hashgacha Pratit, but very often it becomes a Hashgacha Klalit. Like, it doesn't, I didn't expect to have a public position or to be doing everything, but once you start, and I'm sure Rabbi Stepsky will tell you, once you start involving yourself in other people's Hashgacha Pratit, then your own life starts changing based on other people's situation as well, and you become sort of almost as we know, Tolova Marshall, you become hung on that hook of being involved in Hashgacha Pratit. The amount of times I've been the only Orthodox Jew in the middle of nowhere, bumped into an Israeli in the airport in India, in Nepal, in Sri Lanka, on the way back from Sri Lanka, during lockdown, when I thought I was the only person traveling, had a special landing endorsement to go, not even a visa. I bumped into this nice Israeli guy at the airport who was there for business, who had pulled some strings somehow. And he was, there is a hashgacha, especially if you work in hashgacha, you see a lot of it. You see a lot of things where you go to factories, you bump into mashgichim, and into all sorts of experiences like that. I do believe very much that, I think everybody feels this way when they meet their zivug, that was truly not just hashgacha pratit, but it was barur. It was obvious before me. From maybe 2-3 minutes into the conversation, I felt that was a real hashgacha.
What about children and
their education? Yes, you have to educate them, right?
So, you've got the freedom when they're little.
Exactly.
What thoughts do you have as they grow?
So, anybody who's my age pretending they know what they're going to do with their kids, I could tell you lots of things. But the truth is, yes. But my daughter was enrolled in a local Indian school, actually an international school. It's mostly in English, also in Malayalam, which is a southern Indian language they speak mostly in Kerala. And she's astounded us all. She does very well there, and because it's India, it happens to be that it's very, very rarely complicated to say, my daughter can't come to school for the next month because if you can't have bread this week, or actually it happens to be that this day is our holy day, because they just sort of go along with it. Okay, makes sense. A holy day. So, my daughter has been to the main campus to speak about being Jewish. The school itself is very, very proud of its one Jewish student. She's 7, by the way. She's a genius. Speaks a few different Indian languages, a bit of Afrikaans, lekker Afrikaans. And she's a bookworm. She loves to read. You find her reading the Midrash, find her reading all sorts of things. I think she's in Charlotte's Web.
You haven't been in India for a while, so
it's true.
there's
So
been a disruption.
it is. I think that a lot of people, not just myself, a lot of people have had this in the disruption of the COVID as well. That we've been doing a mixture of online tuition, homework and testing, Kodesh things. Basically, I would sum it up with saying I've been improvising the best I can, and I'm really in awe of my wife's dedication to it, because she's a naturally gifted teacher, and it happens to me. I think my daughter's doing great. My son's doing good too, but I wish that he was in kindergarten as well. I think that I really believe that that's an intrinsic, needful experience that the young kids need to get back to school as soon as possible. Not necessarily for A, B, C, D, E, F, G, but mostly to why did he steal my toy is probably a more valuable lesson that they get. Any other questions I can answer?
Amazing.
Thank you.
I was just looking through here over the last few years, all the pictures
Oh,
you sent me when you were sitting on the train with the guy with the monkeys.
that.
Can you say that? I mean, I've got some phenomenal pictures here.
Look,
that you've sent me.
normally when I do the
I've got the Purim picture here.
the Purim picture. No,
The shadow one.
don't show that.
The
What
fruit
happened?
market, you're sitting with a bunch of Indian ladies.
Oh, that's your photo.
And the other, feeding all the poor. That's the soup kitchen.
So
Can you share some of these? I mean, it's
okay.
amazing, some of these.
I wasn't going to mention that, but
The elephants.
Indian elephants is synonymous. I had this theory a long time ago that maybe one of the most popular deities is an elephant, because the elephant is connected so deeply with the royal family throughout India. Normally when we do this year, I have photos. I get my laptop out and I have lots of colourful slides. If anyone wants after this year, I have all sorts of fun photos of India and all sorts of other silly things I'm happy to show people. Me and my wife, whilst we've been in India, we've been zocha to help assist with a few different food operations. We work in food, and it happens to be that India does food for the poor in a way that puts most religions to shame. I can tell, I don't know if anyone has ever been to Amritsar, to the Golden Temple, which is a central Sikh temple. Sikhism is a later religion that developed in India, monotheistic religion, no idols, something like that. And at this temple, they feed about 50,000 to 100,000 people a day. It's all completely free. They feed anybody who comes. And because I have a very good friend of mine, a good friend of my father, I should say, who used to work with my father, called Mr. Charanjit Singh, who is a very, very devout Sikh. He made some inroads for me, and I was allowed to go to the temple and to visit the kitchen and to see everything and to see how they put down 50,000 meals a day. I mean, and to see the langar and to see all the halls there. And after that, we decided we would make it our business also to help with soup kitchens. So our little thing that we sometimes do is we go to visit Noahide communities in India. Very often we can't eat with them when we come, which would be a problem, except that there's a solution there, which is you just build them a new kitchen. So when we come, we donate kalim, we donate vegetables and foods and stocks, and we feed the community, we give a share, and we leave. And we hope that that's a lasting effect. There have been some crazy moments in India, obviously elephants and monkeys, and there was a time when I missed a flight. It's quite a funny story. I was late for my flight. Anyway, I got to the airport, and it happened to be this festival, and all of these guys were at the airport with these massive idols, which was interesting. And what had happened was that they had bought priority boarding tickets for the idols. But many of the men who were carrying the idols had like the basic ticket without priority boarding. So this argument had ensued at the gate about who was going to get onto the airplane. And meanwhile, I had important cash for us to do. Really, I wanted to get back home. So I ended up stranded at the airport, lost there for a few times. That's happened a few times. I've been caught in massive storms. I've driven from India to Nepal. That was an incredible journey. Probably the scariest thing that's ever happened to me. We were driving with this guy who spoke no English. Suddenly, he slammed the brakes on. Of course, there was a seatbelt in the car. It was a very safe Indian vehicle. So obviously, I bounced off the dashboard. And he said, T-man, T-man. Looked to the side of the road in the pitch blackness. There's this illuminated little stand, probably not much bigger than the Stender, with a green light and a little guy pouring chai like this. I guess when you need a cup of tea, you need a cup of tea. So we get up, the guy gets his tea, speaks to the guy in Nepalese. Obviously, my Nepalese is not very fluent. And I noted that about maybe 150 yards away from this tea stand is an absolute plummet drop down to the end of oblivion off the side of a mountain. And it happens to be that this tea guy comes every night and he puts his tea back there, and everybody knows that that's where the road ends because the tea guy's there. If you know the road. If you don't know the road, you become part of the scenery. Obviously there have been India's a very colourful place. I personally feel that we get an incredible welcome there when we go there as Jews, especially when we're visibly Jewish. There is some kind of deep kesher between India and between Israel. I believe very strongly that there is this kesher. I've been going there now. I think the first time I went there, I was with my father. Since that point until now, I've never had a rude experience. I've only had pleasant experiences. I've never experienced anti-Semitism. In fact, normally Indians are very, very proud of their Jewish community, their Jewish heritage. And I think that many Hindus see Jews as a sort of like kind of Hindu. They've got, they've got these different family customs, and they've got these different hats and things. No, okay, that would do. And then, when they say to you, classic, if you meet Hindus and Indians, they say, do you eat meat? I say, well, it's complicated. Do you eat eggs? I say, well, we eat eggs. But first we have to check them. They say, do you eat vegetables? Yeah, we eat vegetables, but first we have to check. And by the time we've done explaining to them, they're like, oh, you're Hindu. Very good. We took it's probably my favorite story. I think it teaches so much about Judaism. We took a housekeeper whose name is Bima. If that's not a hashgacha. And she's the most lovely, wonderful, caring person. She looks after my children, she looks after my wife when I'm not there, and she translates for us. Not that she speaks English, but she translates whatever we kind of play guesapes with her. And we had to explain to her, through another translator, that you're going to be coming to the synagogue every Saturday. You're going to have to bring the kids. This is your job. The synagogue and our house are very, very close to each other. And she'd been living in the town her whole life. She'd never gone to a Jewish synagogue before. So she walked in. The first thing she did was she kissed the ground. She knew immediately what it was. It was a holy place. And I said, look, you should stay for the Shabbat service so that you can get an idea of what happens when the food needs to be brought out. All the usual things. And she, obviously with my wife, they would run the tables to bring out the kiddush and everything like that. And I could see that she was very, very perplexed by the obvious that we had no symbolism. We had no statue. And so she was kind of like puzzled. Everyone's got their book. Rabbi's got a big book. Torah books big. Okay. And then she got it. She got it immediately. We opened the ark. We took out the Sefer Torah. Ah, the book god. That's it. That's it. The book god, right? They've got their books. And everyone rushes up and they kiss the book and they kiss the big scroll. The big book. Right. And that's what she explained to us. That we're the people of the book because we have the book god. And it's definitely an interesting observation, I think. That we venerate the book. Obviously, to us, it's not Hashem, but we also believe to a certain extent that it is out stepping on any philosophical toes. Because I know we've got some serious philosophers in the audience. We say Hashem is Torah 1. So what do we mean by that? But obviously, the book God is a good one, and we miss Bina very much. We're regularly in contact through WhatsApp. And it happens to be that they're looking after all of our stuff, so they've kind of got it all in storage there. So it's also quite a nice hashgacha. Since we've been there, we also had an incredible moment that for me has shaped almost everything. We had one of the oldest Jews in India living with us, Auntie Sarah Cohen. Actually wear a kippah, an Indian kippah that comes from her shop. I always wear them. Sometimes wear a cap, but I only wear that kippah. She used to make the kippahs, and when she passed, it fell upon me to be the rabbi and to do the burial, which was interesting because it has a specific Indian custom, which I knew all about, of course. They tried to explain it to me. They gave me a book. It's complicated. So we had to do it. We had to do it according to the Malavari, the Paradise culture and the custom, which was unique. My wife had to also do the tahara. They don't teach you that in Kollel. They don't teach you to do tahara in Kollel in general. I don't know what Kollel other people went to. I never learned to do tahara there. They don't teach you how to deal with mourning, and they don't teach you what happens when the entirety of Jewish India turns up on your doorstep for the most prominent, one of the most prominent Jewish members of India passing. We had hundreds of people turned up. It was one of the first times the Malabar and the Paradesi community had prayed together in a long time. There was an achdut there that was so real and so genuine. And I think about her a lot. She was a really lovely, special, warm person, loved chocolates. And we used to go every week. We used to sing Shalom Aleichem at her house. We used to make kiddush for her and things like that. She was just a very, very lovely, sweet woman. And obviously it was extremely complicated to do a burial in India. I'd never, these are not things that you prepare yourself for in Kollel or even while you're busking. They're not things that you normally prepare for. There's been some amazing moments on the journey. Kashrus is so complicated. If you buy spices and they're ground, I deeply recommend that you get them with a heksha. People go, what could go wrong, right? It's complicated. The amount of stuff that they put into there, the oils, the additives, all these additional compounds they're putting in everything. These days, kashrus doesn't look like people want it to look like. People make a dimyon in their mind. Kashrus are very simple. It's factories. It doesn't work like that anymore. The products are made from hundreds of ingredients from all over the world. The amount of possibility of adulteration is elephfold. It's massive. It's easier, of course. You're trying to assume that the kashrus looks like a small, factory or a kitchen in London. It's nice. As soon as you start chucking in China and Sri Lanka and Nepal and India in there, you have to be very, very cautious about what kind of additives are going in, what kind of oils, whether or not there is exposure to meat, shellfish in the factory. Does anyone here cook with dried herbs? Don't you know fresh herbs, Claire? How do they dry the herbs? What do they dry on the belts that they dry the herbs on? Are they also making fish food? I see you've got the fish food. That's the classic. They make the fish food sometimes on the same belts as the dried herbs. The Nigia, the Rowe traders there. You have to be cautious. India is a place where you learn. When we come to England, everything's so easy. There's a kosher supermarket, and you walk in, everything's got a heksha on it. Oh, it's so nice. India, it's a little bit more complex, but we manage somehow. If anybody wants to come to India and would like to do a trip, advise you afterwards, come get my email, and I'll set you up, and you'll come, and I'll make sure that you have a kosher trip and you see all the Jewish sites. So I don't really have more to ask. There are no more questions. I think also it spoke more than I was aiming to. We should end here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Shikaya to you. Bracha, that's stuff I know next year.
Where am I going? I'll ask my wife.
Where are you? Where are you?
I'm Zilcha to be in the house of an incredible rabbi.
There's some refreshments here. Please help some.